Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Middle Ground, Mike. We got a great guest here, Joel. I don't know how to say your last name. I'm terrible at names.
That's all right. It's
Uh,
Bouchard.
that's what I thought, but I wanted to be fair. I appreciate everybody joining in here. This is where we always try to find the middle ground on everything, whether it's color of a crayon to trying to figure things out. Joel, thanks for being on here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I liked, the fact that, philosophy, like army veteran, uh, obviously, we talked, a little bit about music, record producer, and I'm always, and like I was telling you earlier, Tom McDonald just kind of really got me curious about the other side of music because he always talks about it a lot. And I've listened to music my whole life, but I never really thought about your end of it until he started talking about it. And then I'm like, okay, well, how does this work? And I'm a guy that if I don't know how it works, I'm going to figure out how it works. Even if it's just general
Yeah.
idea, I'm going to get
So
an idea.
so you're a philosopher. That's what you do, right? Is you take things that are common to everybody else and you dig down into them, you critically think about them, and you kind of discover some of the secrets. That's what philosophy is all about.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I do.
Music is one of those things where not a lot of people think about it. They listen on their radio or wherever, and they take it for what it is. But there's a lot that goes into it from all angles, right? So you mentioned how Tom McDonald there does everything himself. I'm the same way, right? So I all the way from building the computer in my studio to playing all the instruments, doing all the production work, writing all the songs. So it's interesting. Once you have those skills, you never really listen to music quite the same way again because now you're always thinking about, okay, well, not only what are the instruments playing, but also what sort of production tricks did they use, and all these different things are always going through your mind.
Oh yeah, my son, I think he can play 6, 7 different instruments. He's 15. He goes to percussion camp all the time. I mean, he's got electronic drums, regular drums, and he's got like I don't even know how many guitars. He'll go to a garage sale and find a guitar that probably most musicians wouldn't even look at. He'll be like, "I'll buy it for $20," and he goes home and just starts like it's crazy. I mean, it's what you do in terms of that, like kudos, because that takes a lot of patience. Like I've learned the editing from podcasting, right? And I'm like, I can only imagine what a musician goes through being so critical of themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Editing a podcast versus mixing a song are two really different things, and mixing a song is definitely significantly more difficult.
Yeah, I can
But
imagine.
yeah, no, it's a labor of love, right? You do because it's fun. Yeah, no, I'm right in the same boat with your son there. I've got a closet full of guitars. I've got a couple that I've built. Yeah, it becomes an addiction at some point.
Yeah, he's mentioned a Les Paul a couple times. I said, man, I'm like, you're gonna have to really figure something out to get a Les Paul. I mean, I'll buy you
Yeah,
one, but we gotta like, I'm like, I think like a cheap, crappy one, barely refurbished is like 3, 4 grand. The last time I had looked.
yeah, they're not cheap for sure.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best guitars out there, but I mean, if you even snag one,
Mhm.
but yeah, so kind of like talking a little bit about like what you do, right? So how do you go from being an army veteran to record producer? Like that's like such a shift in like gears and way of thinking and approach to me anyways. Yeah, I mean, obviously different to you, but I mean, it's so rigorous, disciplined inside the military. Whereas music's a little bit more, I feel like you kind of maybe have to be inspired a little bit more than, like you don't get inspired at 2 o'clock on a Monday just because you decided you had to.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question, and it's a great for this podcast, right? The middle ground, because again, that's part of what philosophy is. Maybe not in general, but to me personally, right? My personal philosophy is as a generalist, I love to engage new things, new hobbies, new ideas. And I love to be a beginner because if you're a beginner, what that means is that you're doing a lot of failing, right? And failing kind of keeps you intellectually humble, intellectually honest, right? To always be, if you're really good at one thing, you start to think that you just know it all, I think is sort of the
Yeah.
temptation. So to get outside your comfort zone and to be doing new stuff is always good. And then to try to connect those things, right? To try to make sense of what brings those things together is always an interesting challenge. So yeah, I was in the Army Reserves, so I wasn't ever full time, other than basic training and some other exercises and things. Got a couple medals and did 8 years.
Oh
So
wow.
music actually came first.
Okay.
I have an interesting life timeline, whether it's education or hobbies or occupations. It's kind of all over the map. But yeah, music came before the Army.
Oh okay. Yeah. See, I guess I've been in the same industry. Well, let's same franchise for 20 years. Same. Technically, I work for a QSR brand, but I've been with that brand for 25 years. And it's and then I see like how folks like like you admit like I go okay, I'm gonna go do this, I'm gonna go do this, and man, that gives me a level of anxiety because I'm kind of like boop 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 boop. That's how my dad was. So I don't know if that's just why I picked up on it, and now my son, complete opposite from me. He's more like my wife. My wife organizes everything, so it's kind of weird. Like she organizes everything, but when it comes time to kind of like get things like going, it's like okay, I start going, all right, boop, boop, organizing it. She does the planning aspect.
Yeah, I think that everybody has certain areas of their life that they like to explore and be adventurous in, and certain areas of their life that they like to have things just so or be predictable about. I don't think it's fair to generalize people as being, oh, well, this is a person that was very adventurous and out there and stuff, and this is a person that likes things just so. Because some people look at me and they say, man, you've done all these things, like you have a wild, crazy life. But I'm still a guy that only has 3 colors of t-shirt, because that's
I mean,
that's all I can stomach, right?
99% of my shirts are Honolulu blue from my Detroit Lions.
Nice.
Drives my wife crazy.
Yeah. So I think that everybody has the areas of their life where they're willing to step outside a little bit more, and other areas where they're inclined to be more conservative. And I think that um part of living a an honest life is being able to identify those and understand if they're healthy, or if maybe you should push yourself a little bit.
I think that it kind of goes back to what some people say is knowing who you are.
Mhm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or at least be willing to try to find out. You
Yeah.
know, and that's where I went with this podcast. So, I never want to say my employer. So, my employer, it kind of taught me how to like talk to people, right? It gave me like this, hey, this is how you engage people, this, that, and the other thing. Like my son used to hate going to the store because next thing we're cashier, 15-minute conversation, and he's like, let's just go. And then COVID hit and I completely became like reclusive. Like, I don't want to talk to people. Like, I don't want to go, I don't want to leave my house. I don't want to go places anymore. It was like so crazy because my wife's like, well, that's not who you are. Like, usually you'd have a hard time finding me out. I was, and so it's just like, it's crazy. And then I'm like, well, I want to change a pace in the life, like I want to try down the road to pursue this maybe full time. And I'm like, well, I like talking to people. I like politics. I like thinking about it. I was like, shoot, why not just start a podcast and see where it goes? Then the pod match has been like so great.
Yeah. Yeah. I was one of the first people to use Podmatch
Really?
years ago. I was one of the very first people. And yeah, it was always fascinating from the beginning. They use the same algorithm that like Tinder uses, essentially, to match up people for dating. Yeah. So they look at, hey, so what's your podcast about, and what is this guest's values, and what's the percentage that they align, and then they suggest us to each other. And more often than not, it's been great. Like my only complaint is every once in a while you get somebody who's very product focused, which isn't a problem. If there's some podcasts that are like that. Hey, come on and just talk about your book, or just talk about whatever. But sometimes you get matched with one of those people and you go, I kind of wanted to have a real in-depth conversation, not just focus on whatever your product was. So that'd probably be
Yeah.
my only complaint. But other than that, usually there's a lot of, very interesting, very knowledgeable people. And I think it's pumping out really good content, I think, in a interesting third party way that allows some of the littler guys to kind of get their message out there in a way that,
Yeah,
you know, you couldn't, beforehand.
yeah, it's put me on the map. Before that, I was kind of using Buzzsprout and just publishing and kind of going, well, I don't know. I didn't really know a whole lot of people. I knew people in real life, but and then I'm like, I stumbled upon Podmatch and Matchmaker, and I'm like, well, man, Podmatch just is a lot more straightforward, organized. Not that the other company's bad, but I just like the flow of Podmatch. Like it's organized. It's everything just kind of syncs up. And I think I believe the CEO's name is Alex. Like I said, I'm terrible with names. He's commented on a couple of my things on Facebook. He's just such a nice guy, and that I've watched a lot of his videos, and he's really passionate about the industry.
Yeah, Alex is fantastic. I've talked to him a few times. I've been a guest on his show.
Okay,
Yeah, so he has a podcast, and if you're on Podmatch, you can be matched with him.
man. Oh man.
Yeah, so he makes you jump through some hoops to be a guest. You have to do your homework. You have to really make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. That you're a legitimate podcaster, in other words. But no, he's just a phenomenal pod matching with his podcast and what he's trying to do for podcasters. It's really pretty inspiring.
Yeah, I mean it's great. I mean it kind of just like all that like wraps into like the things like the like we were talking philosophy. You being a producer. It's like to me, it just kind of like all makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, give us like some background on like the record producing aspect because that's very curious. Like your background on it and kind of
Yeah.
how you flow with it.
Yeah. So I was kind of an odd kid that didn't like music. So I started listening to music when I was 12 or 13, and it was like classical stuff. And then when I was
Duke
15 or
Ellington.
16, yeah, so when I was 15 or 16, me and three of my friends just did like the most teenage boy thing ever, which was like, hey, let's start a band. None of us play any instruments, but we're going to do it. So everybody picked an instrument. I got guitar because my older brother does play guitar. And
Okay.
so we all kind of taught ourselves and played together for a few years, working out the kinks of being terrible. And eventually got pretty good, started playing some Battle of the Bands and recorded on a cassette tape, if anybody knows what those are anymore. And then,
Don't age us too much.
yeah, so then when I was 19, I was one of the younger ones in the group. My drummer got married kind of young, and my bass player went off to college in a different state. And so for me, it was like, man, I'm just starting to figure out what music is. I'm just starting to like it. So I didn't want to give up. So I was 19. So I went to Guitar Center and at the time spent my whole life savings, my whole $900 to buy an electronic drum set and a bass guitar and an audio interface and some mics and stuff. And just said, I'm going to figure it out. And so I taught myself how to build a computer, built a recording computer, taught myself how to play all the instruments, taught myself how to do all the audio editing. And there was a lot of years where it was really bad. It's still, I'm starting to get all right, but, I still wouldn't say that I'm fantastic. But, and so I started putting out my own music. I've done 5 albums, a bunch of EPs, bunch of singles. My most recent thing actually came out, is in the process of coming out. I did a cover of Kokomo by the Beach Boys for my wife. That was her favorite song. So it was her birthday a
Great
couple
song.
weeks ago. So yeah, I did a cover of that. I know it's out on Apple Music. I'm not sure if it's hit all the streaming sites yet, but I know at least it's there as of right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, yeah, and I've done some albums for other people as well. Um, and again, it's mostly stretching that comfort zone a little bit, right? It's not easy to sit in your bedroom and learn how to build a computer, play instruments, but it's low risk because you're just in here messing around by yourself. But it's a little bit more difficult to, when people reach out to you and say, hey, I'm somebody who's just a songwriter. I don't play any instruments, but I've written a couple of songs. Can you put music to them and produce them for me? And to go, okay, yeah, let's do an album. Or to have somebody who goes, hey, I have an electronic album that I want to have produced. Can you do it? And I go, well, I'm mostly, you know, alternative rock, but yeah, sure, I'll give it an electronic album a try. So yeah, it's just one of those things that is just sort of organically grown out of a curiosity and a passion for a subject. And I'd say that's probably true of most of my hobbies, and I think that's probably the way most people just learn naturally, is that same way.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I started messing around with computers early to mid '90s, maybe right in that ballpark, '92 to '95, somewhere in that ballpark. I really kind of, and then in high school, I had like two computers in my house. Most kids are outside doing crazy things. I'm over here installing operating systems like Linux, Unix. I'm just like going all over the place, and I'm just, my dad's like something, because back then it's like something wrong with you. Like, do you not like people? And I'm like, I like people. I'm like, I know a bunch of people online, Dad. And ironically, I'm still friends with a good chunk of those people 30 years later. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of went on a chat thing one day. Next thing you know, we like made our own, and then just like we were talking about, philosophy, right? Okay, well, I'm sure how it works. Okay, well, we start our own server, and then boom, 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 boom. Yeah, so it's kind of crazy how that works when you're young to how you end up.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And somehow that shared passion for something that was early adoption can lead to long-term relationships. Podcasting's the same way, There's a lot of people that I was a guest on their show or they were a guest on my show early that, we still talk because I think that in a lot of ways, the podcasting medium is the way that one of the few ways that deep conversations still happen in the modern
Yeah.
world. Everything there's not a whole lot of face-to-face contact like you were saying. After COVID, things really kind of died down a little bit, and I don't think a lot of the younger generation are having a lot of deep, you know, with attention spans and everything else, right?
Oh, yeah. No,
I
it's
remember sitting on the hood of my car looking at the stars, asking my friends, hey, you think there's a God, or what happened before the
yeah.
universe, that type of stuff. And where that happens nowadays is on podcasts. So I think that's where people are kind of getting their fix for some of those
Yeah.
questions.
That connection that was like to us growing up was just like putting on your shoes, is now something that people are like, it's this long lost art. And it's like, actually, it's pretty natural if you put the electronics down. And now, back when we were growing up, it was the electronics were like an escape from every day. Now, your everyday life is an escape from your electronics. It almost seems like, and everything just kind of like flipped, and that's just, who'd have ever thought like going outside and talking to your neighbor would be an escape from your house? Like, it's just so weird.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's really strange because you're absolutely right. Like I remember, yeah, I got to play Sega Genesis for half an hour a day,
Oh my God.
and the rest of the time you had to be outside until it was dark, and then you could come back in,
Yeah,
you
your
know.
parents had no idea where you were.
Yeah, yeah, no idea, nobody cared,
Well,
but
I'm gonna go to Jimmy's house 30 miles away.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, technology, electronics, so, there's nothing inherently wrong with them. They're just tools, and tools can be used or abused given certain ways. So, yeah, I obviously, with somebody who has a recording studio, I'm obviously a huge fan of technology. Here we
Oh, yeah,
are,
big time.
having conversation with technology. So there's there's great things you can do with it, but unfortunately, I think the majority of people are kind of wasting away their lives with it in
Yeah.
some regards. Like you could do so many cool things, but you're not. You're using it for as a time waster.
Yeah, and I feel like, technology's kind of really just taken people and brought out some of their worst attributes to where if they weren't so heavily involved in it, that part of them might not even exist. That is so
Mhm.
like, gets them out of who they might normally be. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
and I feel like social media has kind of pushed that to the edge. And it's like, okay, we got to figure out how do we regulate this? Like philosophy, right? How do we regulate social media ourselves, and just kind of, it's so hard to balance it.
Right. Yeah, it's so easy to take a tone with somebody when you're writing a comment on a YouTube video or, a comment on Facebook or whatever that you would never take with somebody in real life.
Yeah.
And so then the question becomes, well, what is your actual real genuine thought on the matter, right? Because it's probably not one or the other. It's probably somewhere in the middle ground. Because what you'll find is that, with social media being this sort of echo chamber that's bombarding you with one point of view, it makes it very easy and without having to confront anybody to just write something that is really vicious, and whereas if you were to meet this person in real life and they were to say the same thing that they said to you, you might not agree with it and you might confront them about it, but more often than not, it's probably going to be a conversation rather than an exchange of insults,
Yeah, it's kind of like I was talking to my wife, and we were talking. I said, growing up, two guys could sit there and just punch each other in the face per se. All right, we get over it. Whereas like a lot of the girls that I went to high school with, and even some people my wife used to be friends with, they're like, oh yeah, no, no, no. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Guys are just, I don't know, like, and I'm not like making necessarily making like about like the sexing, right? It's like, it's just that different how it's like a guy can sit there and have a different point of view, not agree. If it did break onto a fist fight for whatever reason, you generally got over it pretty quick. Because if not, one of your parents is going to come make sure you got over it pretty quick.
Mhm.
Whereas the girls in when I went to high school, I don't know about yours, but a lot of them could be very catty towards each other.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And when we think about how we sort of solve this problem, a lot of it does have to be the self-regulation, right? Facebook's not going to do it for us, right? The
I wish.
government's not going to do it for us, right? And if they did do it for us, then we would complain that they're impinging on our rights and
Yeah,
everything else.
true.
So yeah, people have a freedom of speech. So how do we draw the lines, right? And I think that it has to be just a reconsideration of how we interpret communication, right? And I think that from a philosophical standpoint, right? Well, what is a philosopher trying to find? Well, a philosopher is trying to find the truth, right? And it's amazingly difficult to find the
Oh,
truth,
it is. Man.
but it can be a lot easier to find falsehoods. So, you know, questioning and going through things and being able to have a dialogue with somebody, right? You can be proven wrong and not have to get defensive, not have to take offense to it, right? But just say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'd never thought of it that way. I'll have to reconsider what I was thinking." You know, and it's a difficult thing to say, but like I said, what makes it easier for me, anyways, is having a wide range of experiences, right? If you're always a beginner and you're always screwing up anyways, well, then it's not a big deal if you're talking with somebody and you figure out that, hey, you were wrong about something. You go, oh, okay. You know, and that's what I do on our podcast, is I'm very particular about not editing anything out because I want to show the listeners what it's like to actually do philosophy. Philosophy is a very, very difficult thing. We take a whole hour and we look at one word usually, and we talk about the etymology and what philosophers said about it in the past and what we think it means in the modern day and questions about it for the future. And sometimes you put your foot in your mouth, you contradict yourself, or you have to take 5 seconds to think about it, or you're stumbling over your words. That's natural. That's stuff that happens to human beings. If I edit that stuff out of
Yes.
a podcast, all of a sudden everybody thinks that I know all the answers and I'm perfect. That's not, and that's harmful, right? That's harmful to people out there to think that podcasters are just these perfect people, right? And all of a sudden you have them forming cults of personality and that sort of thing, right? No, we're just people. We're just normal people. We make mistakes. If we screw up, there's some things that we think we've thought all the way through that we haven't. And then when somebody with a different perspective brings it to our attention, how do you react to it? Do you just bury your head in the sand and stick with your position and get angry and just try to be whoever shouts the loudest wins? Or do you go, yeah, I guess I never really considered that? Doesn't mean you have to accept their argument wholesale. You shouldn't. You should never accept anything anybody says on face value. You should always be thinking about your own position and integrating multiple different perspectives to come up with it, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean that's definitely key. Like philosophy. Speaking of that, so I've always kind of went by the truth is perception is truth to most people. So like, and this is why when I'm working, I tell people I'm like, you have to really make sure you when you're training someone, you get them to understand what the pen is. Because I may look at a pen and see blue, but you may look at it and see baby blue. but yet it's still just a pen, but our truths are different. That we're like finding like where that, like you were saying, like finding the actual truth sometimes can be hard, right? And the pen just be simplifying it. But let's say we have a vehement disagreement over that pen. Then now it just kind of starts like, okay, people get crazy and this, that, and the other thing. So it's just truth is in the eyes of the beholder, and you can be right and be wrong at the exact same time.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people don't agree with nowadays is the idea that there's certain things that are just relativistic. Like the one that I always like is being a philosopher, a lot of people like to ask me, well, what's the meaning of life? And they're expecting some grand, complicated answer. But the real answer is whatever you think it is,
Yeah,
right?
there is no
It's the
definition.
that's the only answer is the meaning of life is whatever you personally think the meaning of your life is. Because if you're looking for an overarching meaning of life for all of humanity or for all of just life in general, you're never going to find it. There's no scientific empirical way of demonstrating that. The only thing you can go off of is your subjective viewpoint, right? And some people, like Albert Camus, think that life is meaningless and absurd and, end up killing themselves. And some people think it's just the greatest thing that there ever was, right? I'm one of those people. Like everything fascinates me. Everything is cool and interesting.
Yes.
So if you look at him and me, and you ask, what's the meaning of life? There couldn't be one answer if we both exist, right? We each have to have our own. And so that's just, it's relativistic in that way.
Yeah, no, it's like I tell people, I'm like, when I was moving up through the ranks of working, they're like, oh, well, nobody ever taught me this or nobody ever told me this. And I'm like, nobody ever did me either. I went and found out. When I seen a repair guy working on something, I was like, hey, how did that happen? Is this something we did? Is this something we could prevent? How does that work? Did I become a master at it? No, but I definitely learned how to figure out if something was wrong. And then it started to help me. Okay. And then over time, you start learning. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. And I think that that's kind of gone because of social media to a point, right? Like social media can be great in the aspect of, hey guys, does anybody have an issue with their fridge that isn't running right? And then you got a bunch of people that are going to put all their ideas out there. And this is what happened to me. I mean, you're going to get some people are going to say, hey, my fridge blew up and caught on fire. And then the other person, hey, I've owned that fridge for 30 years, no issues. But if you're the type of person that like wants to dig into it and find out, you look at like a lot of the common things, what yours does, vice versa. And I think that kind of like goes back to like philosophy, right? Like not saying like necessarily people got to follow that method, right? But like we were talking earlier, being able to be true to yourself, be willing to find who you are. And I think that like to me, that is philosophy, is finding who you are, right? Because in order for you to have an understanding of how you view the word music, you got to know who you are to a degree if you want to have like an authentic opinion of it. Like it's authenticity. Like I guess the better way to maybe put it is authenticity of opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is actually really close to home for me because I'm about to start my dissertation for my PhD. And two of the
Nice.
constructs that I'm looking at are what's called trait curiosity and need for cognitive closure. So, trait curiosity is just how naturally curious a person is, just by nature. And need for cognitive closure is how much somebody doesn't like ambiguity. They need answers, right?
Oh
And
yeah, that's
so,
me.
like looking at so looking at how these people engage with a third variable that I won't mention because I don't want to anybody stealing my topic. But basically looking at those two things, right? How do people who are naturally curious, if and then how do people who need answers, don't like there not to be answers, how do they engage with something else, right? You could ask that about pretty much any type of information seeking behavior and see get some insight into the human mind, I think.
Yeah, the ambiguity. It's funny you said that. I had one of the general managers under me. She was talking to a manager with transferred to a store, and she goes, "If Joe does not do well with what ifs when it comes to work, he wants do not come to him with a problem if you're not already trying to think of how you might fix it." Because I always use the saying of I can find a customer or a crew person to tell me about a problem. But to me, a manager is somebody who starts coming up with, you may not have to have the answer, but you got to start trying to figure out how to fix it.
Mm.
That's what
Yeah.
you get paid more money for. If everything, if all you did, was because a lot of managers in a lot of industries to me, all they are is Captain Obvious. That is not working right. Well, gee, thanks, buddy. I'm pretty sure everybody in the room already knew that, like,
Yeah.
and that is like when the manager is like that, I'm automatically like, oh man, this person's gonna hate me because because I just know how my personality is. So I try to like kind of work with them on it. You know what I mean? Kind of like guide them or mold my personality to accommodate theirs. And I had one manager the other day. Oh, nobody's ever shown me anything, and I'm like, well, that's weird because I spent the whole last month showing you stuff every week. Like, who didn't show you anything? Oh, I forgot. How'd you forget? You were here getting paid. Like, what? And it's just I go through that in my head, and then I have to remember. I'm like, okay, be careful how you say that because somebody may think you're calling them stupid, and I'm not
Right.
calling them stupid. I'm just going. I have to, tell people remember that someone's not you.
Yeah.
And that is
Yeah. And I'm,
hard, very, very hard.
oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's very hard to think about things from any perspective but your own. But I think that, yeah, I mean, just the word, the title manager and what it implies, right? The ability to manage people or situations, right? I think there's a lot of people with that title that aren't doing that job, right?
Oh
Because,
yeah,
like you
no,
mentioned, managing, if you are somebody who's managing a situation or managing people, then yes, if you're taking a problem to an upper level, you should have a variety of solutions already in place. Again, not fully fleshed out solutions, but a variety of paths that a supervisor can instruct you to kind of walk down based off of what they think might be the best option. But yeah, it requires some amount of critical thinking and some amount of planning that isn't necessarily present in everybody that has the title.
yeah, and I feel like, and obviously, we were growing up. Not everybody was like that, but I feel, and it's not a criticism of the education system, but I feel like they did a better job necessarily. I don't know how you want to word it back then of teaching critical thinking or getting people willing to engage in it than they do now because now you can just pretty much go Chat GPT, how do I do ABCD and for my homework, and it just tells you, then you actually really had to kind of think about it. It was more memorization than anything, but you actually had to critically think where you were going to find that information in that book. And if it wasn't in that book, where were you going to find it?
Mm.
Hopefully Jimmy has the latest encyclopedia, volume, because yours is 2 editions old. It was just, I feel like it taught people how to learn, like how to figure things out. Where some of the tools that we use today for young kids, I think it really hinders them and it hurts their ability to critically think. Just like take like music for like what like you do, music, even education, right? So some people now, like I'm sure you've heard out in the world, right? Oh man, some of these college graduates, they're not much different than somebody who doesn't have one. Because maybe, like some of those key things that we learned, those principles aren't ingrained in.
Yeah, I think that, what it kind of comes back to is we know empirically through the psychological literature that attention spans are shrinking, right?
Yes.
And so I think that that's the root of the problem. I think if you don't have the capacity to pay attention for any length of time, then you can't possibly develop critical thinking. You can't possibly reflect on what's happening and sort of chew on it and come up with a novel solution if your attention span's short and if you have tools at your disposal that give you the answer, right? As somebody put it this way, I really like this. They're talking about chat GPT and doing schoolwork with it. And they said, well, if you were a marathon runner and you had a magic button that just put you at the finish line every time, and you just hit that button constantly, would you really be a marathon runner or would you just be a finisher? And what's a finisher? What does that even mean, right?
Right.
It's kind of the same thing, right? Yes, doing schoolwork is hard work. Running a marathon is hard work, but there's something in it that is intrinsically rewarding and also intrinsically useful to helping you grow as a person. So if you avoid all the hard stuff, yeah, maybe you fool your teachers once in a while and you get an A, right? Maybe you cross the finish line first at your race and, you come in first place. it's not going to last. You can't do that forever. You can't do that in every situation. Having the patience, the patience, the attention span, the willingness to engage and critically reflect on things, I think in the long run gets you a lot farther in life than just looking up the answers.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, and I don't envy what kids have to go through these days because while it seems easy from my perspective, they also have a lot more social complications than we had where when we were growing up, everything was pretty cut and dry just in general. No matter what the issue was, whether it was how you fold your clothes, like just everything was just pretty much just the way we do things. Now it's people judge you if you don't, put that on your next thing, you got a classmate because you don't wear the correct this or that, rather than just kind of maybe giving you some flack at school. Well, now they're going on your social media page, they're in your DMs, they're sending you texts, it spirals, and I feel like it really hurts their ability to kind of make a mistake and fall flat on their face and not spend the rest of their life paying for
Yeah, yeah. I recognized this when my nephew was born because two things happened. One was, I remember him, from the time he was born, just wearing these like cute outfits, like he's got a bow tie on and stuff. And I remember like, man, I had a bowl cut till I was 12 years old,
it.
you know, but all the kids have these fancy haircuts and fancy clothes.
Yeah, we
And
all
the
look.
other thing that I remember is one of my other friend's kids, when the kid was born, he created a Facebook page for her. And I go, this kid's whole life is going to be online, and
Mine was.
when I thought about those two things in particular, and then sort of reflected on my early life, right? And all the mistakes that I made that weren't documented, and all of the stupid things that I did, what you realize is that all of those stupid things that you do as a kid are what make you an interesting adult.
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you got to be weird. You have to be playful and creative, and you have to do those things, and that's the thing is kids always want to fit in, and so kids are always weird and then they want to fit in. And then when they're adults, they realize fitting in sucks and they go back to being weird and they live fulfilling lives. Well, they're missing the first part now. Like from the beginning, they feel like they have to fit in. And it really does make me nervous for when in their life are they going to figure out that being cool is just being yourself. Now, like you mentioned earlier, being authentic to who you are. When are they going to realize that? And it's hard. Like you said, I think it's the social media, having your whole life under a microscope that makes that really difficult to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, man, I love that you're big into philosophy because it's just this that's awesome because a lot of people get kind of I don't want to say tripped up on it, right? But they're definitely not philosophers. They don't even look at it that way, however you want to word it. So I mean, kudos to you, man. Wow. Just you're like touching it in with your music, right? So like in terms of philosophy, like how does your philosophy, like the way you're operating, apply to like how you're making music?
In a lot of ways. And so yeah, first I'll talk about kind of philosophy connecting back to what we were just talking about, which is you're right. I think that most people would think that philosophy is a huge gamble to be into in our day and age, right? For the reasons I just talked about.
Yeah.
Attention spans are short, critical thinking is low, and all these other things that are sort of antithetical to philosophy. So, but in my mind, that's just because philosophy kind of has the world's worst marketer, right? Because everybody thinks that it's this dry, boring thing, right? If you look up the top philosophy podcasts on iTunes, don't get me wrong, I like them, but they're very dry, analytical things that most people don't want to engage with.
I
So,
know that people hate that, and I can listen to analytical stuff all day. Sorry.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. But so for my show, that's not what philosophy was to me. When I started in college and didn't really know what philosophy was, I took this first class with my professor, and he was just super engaging, and got you interested in everything. And I go, that's what I want my podcast to be. So I had him on. Right. So I'm the host. He's the resident expert, and we try to recreate some of those conversations and just show how like we say, anything is philosophical and everybody is a philosopher, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter who you are, right? It doesn't matter how you're. how short your attention span is or how much you don't like critical thinking, everybody has at least one topic that if you start asking them about it, they can show you how much more complex and deep it is than you ever had any idea about. Everybody has one of those, right? So that's what the show is, just trying to capture that feeling and then sort of pass that feeling on about maybe topics that people hadn't thought about, you know? So to get them interested in something new, right? And then to sort of cultivate that into your everyday life. So you have an outlook that's more like mine, where I go, man, I can't walk 2 steps without seeing something I think is really interesting and then having to look it up and read into it and think about how it
Yeah.
connects to other things, right? And making life a magical place again. You know, it's difficult as an adult, but that's what it is. And so that connects back into the music because that's the way I use it, right? When I sit down to write a song, there's really two things that I do. One's creative and one's philosophical, right? The creative thing is that I try to never do the same thing twice because I think that's where true creativity comes from and where true creativity dies, right? Is people who, oh, I'm going to practice just a certain way and I'm going to write songs just a certain way. And then all of a sudden you realize that their songs are boring or they're doing the same thing over and over again. So I always try to do something different. When I sit down to practice, I try not to just practice the same chords or the same scales or that sort of thing. I sit down to practice, I go, I'm going to try to do something that I've never done before. And if I can do that, something that I've never done before, usually I'll be really excited about it, right? And then I can take that thing that I've never done and I can use all of the musical knowledge and skills that I have to integrate it into a new song in a way that I couldn't have done before because I didn't know the thing, right? So that's the creative process. And then the philosophical process is just builds on that, right? It's just going, okay, let's take all of the perspectives into account, right? I play guitar and bass and drums and keyboard and I sing. And on top of that, I paint and I do a podcast and, I'm in local government and I have all these things that I can kind of draw on for inspiration and to what music would look like from different perspectives and really kind of hone in on, what is speaking to me in light of the creative process. And as a result, I never have a shortage of ideas. It always blows my mind, right? Because I have a lot of friends who are musicians. A lot of them started when they were my age, and they'll have one song that they've done or two songs that they've done, and they go, "Man, I just got writer's block. I don't know how you come up with so many ideas." And I go, "I have more ideas than I could ever record in my lifetime. Like I really do. I have a note in my iPhone. I actually have separate notes. One's for music ideas, one's for podcast topics, one's for PhD dissertation,
My
and one's for book plots. And every day I'm thinking of some and I'm jotting them down, and I'll never have enough time in my life to do it all, right? So for me, it's not ideas, it's not creativity. That part is easy. It's just not having enough time. So that's how those kind of work together.
yeah, one podcast idea I've been working on is a hydrogen powered podcast. Completely out of the realm of what I normally do, but I'm really curious about hydrogen power in cars.
Yeah.
Hydrogen cars to me, because I live in the north. Well, and you're in New York, I believe, right? So you get like electric cars are a great idea for like New York City, where you don't got to travel long distances. But if you're not in a major city during the winter time, that battery is going to really put a damper on your day. Because then the cold, it like shrinks the battery capacity a little bit. Whereas hydrogen cars, kind of you fuel them up per se, and then it creates the reaction within the battery that goes to the end, with the electric engine. But
Yeah.
and so I've been wanting to, because to me, I think in the northern states and Europe and Canada, it's a more viable solution.
Yeah. I've thought about it some too. It seems to me like it would be a much better alternative than electric cars currently, right? You're exhausting only water. Your refuel time is usually just a couple minutes if you have one of those packs. And Toyota and I think GMC now both have viable engines that use them. So,
Yeah.
and as far as the rare earth minerals needed to build them and stuff, it just kind of seems to make more sense. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see the hydrogen cars overtake the electric ones at some point. It probably won't be for a decade or two, but
Well, yeah.
they just seem to make more sense to me.
Electric cars are ahead of the game because they've essentially been sponsored by the government for the last 25 years. It helps your development along when you're getting money poured into you like no tomorrow.
Right.
Where if they did the same thing to hydrogen, I mean, a lot of the hydrogen we get comes from natural gas. There are other avenues too, right? But America has one of the biggest natural gas reserves in the world. You could bring home the vast majority, 99% of our energy production back to the United States just off hydrogen cars alone. We would be able to, survive off our own supply per se, right? I mean, sure, we'd still buy from other people, preserve our own as much as we can. But to me, it makes a lot of sense because you can do it with water and things like that, but it's really complicated. But I'm thinking, okay, well, they say there's water on. Well, is there a way we could split that and put it into a hydrogen engine that we don't got to worry about if the solar panels are there or if there's a dust storm? We can still travel. Yeah, and that's so like say curiosity, right? That's how I start thinking about things. I'm like, well, if you did that, you could do that, and you could do that, and you can do that. And I just look at it, and next thing you know, I've got like a whole stack of things over here I've printed about hydrogen cars. I had no idea. I've always liked it, but up until like last month or two, I had zero idea how like, it truly went down. And when I read it, I'm like, that network is pretty similar to the petroleum network we use now, like how everything would go. So I'm like, we already have the basic idea of the infrastructure. It would be so much cheaper and more viable to swap to hydrogen than it would be because even the US government has come out and said if everybody switched to electric cars, we don't got the grid to charge. We don't got
Yeah.
enough power. And
Yep.
I'm going, okay, let's all really take that statement and look here. There are not enough power plants being built to accommodate because I mean California, they do rolling blackouts. I know you got to get to work and you got to charge your car, but yeah, we're in a rolling blackout right now. Hopefully your boss understands. Like doesn't just seem like it would work out very well for the rest of us. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that, it also brings in philosophy in the long term thinking, right? Because, oftentimes companies are just looking for profit in the short term. But, if you're looking at it philosophically and you can see that, yeah, the petroleum infrastructure is in place to make hydrogen cars viable now, by investing in that infrastructure, what happens is you see the same thing happen that happens with electric cars or with any other technology, where once the funding is there, the technology progresses, and now you can start to get hydrogen from sources other than petroleum that are sustainable. It's something that would happen eventually. So, yeah, I think it
It
makes
seems to
too
make a
much
lot more
sense to me. I
sense.
think,
Yeah,
yeah, it makes too much sense for it to not happen at
I
some
believe it's
point.
Hyundai or Honda. I'm pretty sure it's Hyundai. Next year or the year after, they are going to be producing a full scale, like full production, kind of like escape size SUV that's hydrogen powered. Like it's going to be mass assembly. Like you're going to be able to like order and have it delivered to the dealership per se. I think that's how they're talking, or they're going to have some in stock in certain areas, but it's like it'll just be mass produced like any other car. And I know they're building more hydrogen stations. So I mean it is there, but I man, I'm telling you that it was just making me think of that because I would do that and I'm like, I don't even know how successful that episode would be because it's like so just like way out there from what I normally do. But
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, this comes back to what we've been talking about the whole time, right? Is that here's something that seems kind of niche and kind of out there. But if you're somebody who's just curious and stuff, well, here we both stumbled upon it,
yeah,
independently at different points, you know, just thinking about, how to solve this problem of transportation in a sustainable economic way, so
yeah, and it's to me, I mean, just out of everything out there, hydrogen just seems to it just you kind of look at it and you're like, why is this even a debate? In
Mhm.
my head, that's what goes to my head. Like, why are we even debating this? It's just so much more straightforward. The public would adapt faster, our industries would adapt faster, yet we're still like beating the dead horse. Electric cars are gonna just we're just gonna at some point we're gonna make it profitable and sell it so cheap if we just keep plugging away. And then you hear like Ford, I believe, is coming out with some cheap electric cars like 25, $30,000. But they're gonna lose money on almost every single one of them, or they're gonna barely break even.
Yeah.
And it's like
And
it's still the
under
same
a prior
problem we had.
under a prior administration where you were receiving, subsidies for that type of thing, that's all fine and dandy. But, in the current political climate, how are you going to sustain that? It's
Right.
it's not it doesn't seem like it's going to be a very viable move.
No, and that's that's the one good thing about the if you want to call it the robber barons, from the late 1800s, early 1900s, it kind of pretty much set up the way we live life now. They seen the long term, you know, if I do this, it's going to lead to all this down the road. And because that they were, they owned everything that they had, they were public companies, but yeah, you weren't, it was just public in name per se, but like, JP Morgan still, till he passed away, he was in charge of everything that he had, that he touched. But, they seen that long term approach, right? Like, to me, if we had like a Henry Ford or a Rockefeller right now, they'd be going, well, hydrogen makes more sense because I can adapt my products to it quicker. And it's something with like more viability. Also has different uses that we can use it, like you generate for your house, right? Yeah,
Yeah, they're
hydrogen
already
fuel
using a
for it.
lot of them on. They're already using a lot of them for forklifts and stuff, fuel cell forklifts and that type of thing. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's
the applications are there.
right. And you just have to look at it and go, somebody's got to get paid for this. Like somebody like is really getting some kickback money to keep things going this way. Because it's just
Yeah.
the dollars. I call it third grader math. It's this many's,
Yeah.
like, I mean, well, that's actually congressional math, but you know, could go on about that all day. I mean, hey, well,
Yeah.
then at least my taxes are going to stay lower. It is what it is,
Right.
but my paycheck is going to not go down because I am salaried.
Yeah.
So the hourly folks can work that extra couple hours. I do not get that option.
Me either.
So it's, but like you say, you're kind of like playing off of that. You work in local government.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm currently on the board of trustees for the village that I live in. So I oversee a few different departments. The fire department, police department, parks department. So yeah, that's
I
it's
can
kind of
imagine
the
at your level with it not being so, there's probably not as much red tape as it would be in a normal, like a bigger city.
no, no, there isn't, and it makes it easier because at the local level, everybody has the same goal, right? Just to make the municipality better. So I'm a registered independent, whereas the place that I live is heavily one color. But people understand that I have the tools and the skill set to try to affect some good change for the community. So I got elected.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. I mean, that's congratulations on that. That's convincing anybody to vote for an independent in this day and age is not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Like
Yep.
you really have to stand out.
Yeah. So we're a good mix. We've got a Democrat, an Independent, and Republicans all on the boards. Everybody has the same goal, right? Just making the community a better place. And you go, man, if you could just scale that up to the federal level all the way through.
We'd be so much better of a country.
Yeah, yeah.
I
But
mean, but the
with
problem,
with more power comes more temptation for corruption, I suppose.
well, yeah, and it's to me a Democrat, Republican, even independent at the local level versus at the federal level are almost like two different political parties for each one. Like the
Yeah.
Democrat at the federal level is not the same Democrat at the local level. Like they don't even think about problems in the same manner.
Hmm.
And so I
Yeah.
think that that's part of lost art, you know, in our government is it kind of always used to be about local government, doing it in your community, being a participant, where now we kind of just look to please, you know, Washington fix it for us. And I'm not trying to be like, hey, we need to get rid of Washington or anything. But no, it's, like what works in California isn't going to work here in Michigan. And what works in
Yeah.
Michigan won't work in New York because we grow up differently. The climate may be a little bit different. How you say the word French fry may be different. So it's, we're looking for people that are just doing everything for a one size fits all approach and then wondering why it doesn't work. Well, we're not a one size fits all nation. Russia, everything in Russia is Russian and it's been that culture for thousands of years. That's not who we are, but we're approaching it like, we're still in Europe where, those cultures have all, been there for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's two things there. One of them is, like you mentioned, people don't even think about local government, but if you really were to look at it and say, and I think this is a social media thing again, or just media in general, right? People fret so much about national politics, but if you think about whatever side of the aisle you're on, We've had a Democrat in office and now a Republican in office. Whatever side you're on, if you thought, oh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, this is awful, this is terrible, chances are the effect that they had on you as an individual
It's
is much,
minuscule.
much less than what your local government, the effect your local government has had on you,
Yeah,
on the decisions that they've made. People should take a much more active interest in their local government, where things like their village taxes or their water or sewer or police department, those types of things that affect them on a day-to-day basis, are those decisions are being made.
yeah. Gosh, when it comes to local government, I mean, I know mine probably is not the biggest fan of me because I swear to God, it's like the last 3, 4 years straight. We want a property tax increase, and I'm like, but my local street still has this like jacked up look on it, and you've raised my property taxes like 3 years in a row. Like, don't patch it because when you patch it, by the time spring comes around, it's like you never touched it.
Mhm.
And then we all got to worry about if our tire's going to get jacked up in it. And it's like, no. So until you can fix that, you're going to get a no vote from me. If you can get that stuff taken care of, no problem for a tax increase. But when that
Yeah,
stuff's not getting done, I can't get behind it.
yeah, you have to think about things logically. We have a municipality that's near us where they paved all their streets nice, and then the next year they replaced all their water mains and dug them up and patched them, and now they're all potholy. And you go, what kind of sense does that make? So yeah, government. We talked about it. I can't remember if it was off the air or early in the show, but there's a tight relationship between philosophy and politics, right? You have to see the long game, because it's not like business where we're just looking for the quarterly profit, right? I'm on the tree board, so planting trees, like, you're not going to see a tree grow up for 20 or 30 years, but you have to plan out where you're going to plant them on the street and which ones are what age and when they're going to have to come down in order to have a nice canopy there for people to walk under, that shades them, that keeps energy bills low, that increases property values, all those types of things. So it's really the long game. So it's very philosophical.
Yeah. I mean, when we moved into our house here, and the basement had like a little crack in the wall, and it was from, I believe it was in, not like olives, but like an olive tree, I think is what it was called. I think that's what it was. And it like the roots were starting to push on the foundation, and I was like, oh man, get rid of that thing. But then once we got rid of it, I'm like, man, the front of my house seems so bare now.
Yeah.
I'm like, it just looks like, I don't know, something just doesn't look right when all my neighbors got this. Well, not all of them, but most of them have a nice tree in their front yard. And I'm sitting here looking at my basement wall, like, man, that cost me like 3 grand to fix. I don't
Yeah.
like that tree no more, man. That tree's got to go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things that just kind of flies under the radar. Um, you know, as a municipality, and not every municipality has a tree board, right? And so, who's deciding what gets cut down or what gets planted or how it gets managed? It's one of those things. Not everybody would want their tax dollars to go there, but in order to have a tree board, at least in New York State, you have to spend $2 per taxpayer per
Really?
year. So
Wow.
pretty cheap. And, it really does a lot of good in the long run. Yeah, it's one of those things, very complicated. Local government, something that people don't think about much. Trees, something people don't think about much. But again, you start digging into it, you start seeing how complicated it is. That's sort of the aspect, the essence of philosophy, the essence of living a fulfilling life, is finding the joy in the complexity around you.
Yeah, I mean, and people don't realize like local governments are the ones who, like the federal government regulates water and things like that, but your local government's the one who really sets up your water infrastructure, and the state and local. Usually it's your local who makes it happen on like, your streets, your side streets, things like that, and people don't realize like how important that is until they have a storm. And they're like, why doesn't my sewer work? Why isn't this draining? And da 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 da. Well, you remember when that guy was wigging out and everybody called him a wacko at the meeting? Yeah, yeah. That guy was trying to tell us what was going to happen, and we all just kind of shrugged him off, and because you always got that one guy out there. It's like, hey, this is going to be really bad, guys, if we don't do something about it. Now, sometimes, it is a little hyperbole, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, just glance to see what he has to say, make sure it's not going to, in Michigan, I don't remember how many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. All the sub pumps or whatever it was and generators on the freeways just like Somehow a bunch of them all just died at one time. All of them just failed. We had freeways just flooded everywhere because the power was out. Well, when the power went out, the pump stopped working. Well, the backup generator never kicked on. So then, of course, they got to fix it. And then the county's like, well, money. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. That funny word money you keep talking about. You keep wanting more and more from me, man. Like, and it just goes back to like, I commented on the county commissioner's page and yeah, he was talking about all the road work they're doing, this, that, and the other thing. And I go, I really appreciate the work you're doing. I was like, but you guys just did this one road that literally didn't even really have a pothole on it. But yet this other main road in this average nice community literally looks like it belongs in a factory road in Detroit somewhere that's been abandoned for 30 years. I'm like, why is the one that like barely anybody travels down compared to the other one? And I never really got an answer. But to me, I'm just in here like the math doesn't math. Like the one with the most traffic should be the highest priority, to maintain. I also have a thing of that I've been, maybe your experience with local government. To me, if it goes, hey, we're going to build a new road to wherever, right? It's going to cost $1 million. Well, we know in 10 years it's going to need ABC. To me, that first set of funding should include what you're going to need for the next 10 years or whatever, right? So that way they don't have to keep coming back to the taxpayer with their handout. We've already got a fund set up that's going to help maintain these things. I feel like it'd be easier for local governments. I know it's a little bit more of a higher cost up front, but I think that the public would be happy that they can walk down the street and see that things are maintained because it was budgeted for, to where now it feels like they kind of just budget for let's get it done and then we'll figure out the maintenance after. That's just what it feels like, how a lot of it goes.
Yeah, yeah. And every municipality is going to be different, and the way that they handle things, the way that they view things. I know that our little village has had a lot of success through leveraging grant funding. So sometimes we do projects in stages, but the reason we do it in stages is because the state or the federal government will provide so much funding for the whole project, and that'll pay for 20% of it. But if we break the project up into 3 different phases, oh, hey, we're going to replace the water plant one year and then the water tower another year and then some of the mains on the street. There's 3 different grants that apply to it. And so as a result, if you get them, and this is all contingent on having good grant writers and, knowing how to make your case and actually needing the money, you can get a much larger percentage of it paid for. Yeah, there's a lot of calculus, that goes into it. And of course, nobody enjoys paying taxes, just period. But, sometimes they go to good stuff and it's always a pain when you see them being mismanaged or you think they're being mismanaged. But yeah, it's a real complicated.
Yeah, we had I live in the city's called Flat Rock. About 6 years ago, 5 years ago, there's we have a Ford plant here. Pretty much the Ford plant is the town. And they had they had a gas leak and it was going into the sewers like gasoline. And smell was going to people's homes and stuff. And well, if our local, well, not local, her name's Debbie Dingle. She's actually, you know, U.S. House, our congressional rep. She wouldn't have blown the lid open. The whole thing would have been swept under a rug and wouldn't have known anything because I didn't know at the time. But almost I remember on the city council worked at the Ford plant. So of course they're not gonna, and I hope they wouldn't do it, but I don't know. But maybe they're not gonna go out of their way to make it obvious, and where Debbie Dingle came in, she said, no, all these people that you're telling they got to get out of their homes, you're paying for their hotel, you're paying for this, you're paying for that, and she didn't like necessarily make them right, but she made it open to the public what was happening. And then all of a sudden Ford had to cave to the pressure because at first Ford was like, oh, we're not doing nothing. And then all of a sudden, yeah, we're going to take care of the public. No problem. You know,
Right.
and and she's a Democrat, and she earned my vote because she's an elderly lady, but she was down here pounding the pavement. She was actually here doing that local job that a federal official should do. And it really impressed me, like, because sometimes it feels like some politicians do it for a photo op, right? And they don't really hear much from that politician about it afterwards. But I'm telling you, until they resolved this thing, this lady was sending out messages every couple of days. It was in her weekly newsletter. When she would get on, the media, she would talk about it. Like she put the pressure on till they fixed it. And it,
Yeah,
it
that's
was
awesome.
nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's why I'm a committed registered independent. There's a lot of pressure when I was running for election to choose a party because they didn't. The mayor who wanted me to be elected, wasn't sure if I was going to get elected, right, without a party. But I said, I can't do it, right, because for the very reason that we were talking about earlier, right, when we were saying you should always. Well, now I'm wondering if it was this podcast or the one I was on earlier. When one of the things I was saying was, you should never wholesale adopt somebody else's argument. You should always be looking at the different perspectives and integrating it into your own. To me, that's kind of what choosing a party is to some extent.
Yeah.
If I put the label Republican or the label Democrat on myself, I'm saying that there are certain things that I'm just kind of taking at face value. There are certain values that I have that are dictated by the party, and I don't like that. I want to look at each issue on a case by case basis and decide what the right or wrong thing to do is, right? So you can hold the rest of the government responsible for what's going on. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
part of my reasoning for it.
No, and I love hearing that like local government aspect of it because a lot of my stuff always seems to go to mainly federal, sometimes state level. Yeah, I mean that's just because that's just where a lot of topics go, and I'm hoping to get more local officials on here if any of you guys are listening out there. I'm not one of them I gotcha hosts. I don't ever see the benefit in doing the I gotcha moments. Yeah, I always think it's condescending. I always hate when people do I gotcha moments in interviews. It's like, come on, guys. We all know this about. Yeah, so it always just kills me. But yeah, I mean, music. I mean, art. Are you like? Do you get into like art? Like, do you paint? Like, what kind of art do you do?
Yeah, yeah, mostly painting. My dad was kind of a professional painter, so he started a sign business in our town. So all the signs around here were hand painted by him. Little municipal mascot is a sea serpent, and so he designed that and things. So I'm nowhere near as good as he is, but I like to mess around with some painting.
I'm telling you, no matter how hard I try, I don't have a steady hand. If I'm trying to paint the house or anything like that, I'm like, God, I'm like, that's one thing where my curiosity, I learned, okay, you know what? I'm not that curious about this. Because I've looked up all the little gadgets and tools, and I'm like, man, the people who do this got to really have a level of patience that I'll
Yeah,
never have.
yeah, I remember watching my dad paint a perfect circle freehand and just like shaking my head, but it's okay. It's okay not to be curious about well, it's not okay not to be curious about everything, but it's okay to investigate things and then realize that it's not your cup of tea, right?
Yeah, I would,
That's fine.
I would love to enjoy it. I've tried to enjoy it. Like I get a lot of ideas, but what goes up here does not translate out of here.
Yeah,
When it
yeah.
comes to that, it just does not. Like we were talking about social media stuff. I love AI technology. I embrace it. I'm not afraid of it. Everybody's like, oh, well, your images. And I'm like, if you've got any image on the internet, AI, 99% chance AI already knows you already. And even if you're not, don't have a presence on the internet, you're on some government website, which means Google already has your catalog. So if that's your fear of it, I won't say unjustified, but don't let that be the reason you don't even try it because that's already there. They just don't put it in front of your face. And I'm not saying like some government conspiracy. I'm just saying, like certain things the government has to publish online or whatever, residencies, things like that. So that's just it's okay. Like it's I use I love making trailers and I put them on the YouTube channel all the time. Stuff. Just, I don't know. I have fun with it, and I use AI to generate a lot of it. I'll kind of like generate a script, then I'll go back to modify the script. Sometimes I'll run it through Chat GPT because sometimes Chat GPT can give me a little bit better of a like I'll put my script in there and I'll be like, hey, make it work better for this AI model, and then it'll kind of like tweak it for me, and then I'll get more of what I'm looking for because some of these AI models you'll be like put 1944 da 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 on this, and then it'll come out 1901637B, and I'm like, I was pretty clear about what I put on here. So just learning how to do those things, right? AI, I just kind of started messing with it, and it just took off. And I use Riverside. I love Riverside. Riverside actually has a neat little feature. Um, you do the clips, right? Essentially shorts. And if it's under 1 minute and there's only two tracks, like me and you can transform that into animated statues. So on my YouTube page, you'll see like there's like animated statue shorts. So, and that's what I did because I was like, you know what? I'm like, I want to do something different with, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I always release like kind of like quick hit news, right? That's what I call it, quick hits. Couple of subjects under 2 minutes usually. Boom, 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 boom. And then I'm like, you know what? This is just a different way of doing it. Most of my friends are like, oh yeah, I kind of like that. One of my friends are like, no, man, that's kind of weird. And I'm like, it's just different, and it was just something I messed with, and I was like, I don't know, I like it. So I just started doing it. And my wife's like, I wish I could just my wife's just not that type of person, she just doesn't get curious and just does it. How do you just do it? I'm like, I don't know. I just started messing with it one day and stayed up all hours. Do you ever do that? You just stay up all hours of the night trying to figure something out?
Not as much as I used to. I try to be pretty regimented about my sleep nowadays.
I'm getting there on that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, AI, it's kind of like we were talking about earlier. AI is a tool just like any other tool. It has some awesome uses, and then it has some terrible uses, right? We covered the terrible ones, right? If you're using it just to get a quick answer, cheat on your schoolwork or to do the sorts of things, it's going to come back to bite you. But I think that it is a powerful tool for, I like to think of it as collaboration, really, where, you start with an idea of your own and you feed it in and it gives you something back and you play with it some. You tell, that's not exactly what I was thinking. And you kind of go back and forth. And eventually you can kind of get something that, portrays your original vision. I did that for my most recent book. So it's not out yet, but it'll be out soon. But I used AI to create the cover. And, it took a lot of prompting to finally get this. This is the image that I had in my mind, right? But I had to go through like 14 different rounds of prompting before it spit out something
Did you
that
feel
was
like
actually,
throwing something at the computer? You're like, man, I typed the specific thing, dude. You're not doing it. Like,
yeah,
what is going on here?
right, right. So, as so it's a tool, and yeah, it's fun to explore, it's fun to play with, and I think that we can become better thinkers with it if it's used properly, or we can become much worse thinkers if we let it do
Do you
all of the thinking for
do you
us.
have a presence on YouTube?
Uh, I think so, but that's all automated. So I'm pretty sure that like my podcasting distributor automatically releases the show on YouTube. I'm pretty sure my music distributor automatically releases my music on YouTube, but I don't do any of it myself.
So there's this neat app/website called vidIQ, I believe is the name of it. So you can put like the browser extension in there. So when you upload a video, it'll give you a bunch of title suggestions, right? And it'll give you strength from 0 to 100, 100 being the strongest. So I kind of put in there what my idea for the title is. And then it'll give me a thing. But then it'll also give me 5 different suggestions under it. And so sometimes, depending on what it is, I'll kind of take that one and then I'll kind of modify it a little bit, and it'll pick up on my thought process. But what it also does is it goes, okay, people that are looking at this type of stuff on YouTube, these are the type of headlines that they go after. So I'm like, okay, but I also don't want to be this generic headline all the time. I want it to kind of reflect how I think to a degree, but I also want to make sure, you're getting that hook in there. You're going, okay, hey, I want you to come in and check me out. And once I started using vidIQ as kind of like I don't know if you want to call it like as if you were like going like we are going back and forth with ideas, right? Once I started doing that, all of a sudden my views and everything in my podcast, everything just kind of started taking off because what I use on that YouTube, I go back and I copied a lot of that to my descriptions of my podcast because a lot of people who watch YouTube listen to podcasts.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
that description, that title is going to snag them on YouTube, to me, chances are they're going to do it. So that way I can just do one universal thing. And then it also offers like a really cool option. It'll do video audit or post audit, whatever, for the YouTube video that you just posted, right? Even with itself. It'll give you a score on it. And then it'll tell you, hey, this is where it could be considered weak at. It is like just like It's like having an auditor at your disposal that you don't got to pay for completely. It's like $9 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, man, this thing is like a godsend. In Riverside, I love Riverside's AI. Riverside's AI will correct eye movement a lot. It'll get if let's say I don't know your connection just dropped, right, and we had to like start the interview again at the middle. Well, it'll give you the option to put those two things together and just get rid of that frozen video screen. So it goes through and it searches for what it calls the fluff. It doesn't automatically delete it. It gives you the option to delete it. It'll be like, hey, we noticed that this doesn't look like it belongs in your interview. Would you like to delete it? And so you can. And I'm like, man, I'm like, oh my God, that just, because I've had a couple episodes, where people's stuff freezes or whatever. I'm like, it's a neat little tool.
Yeah.
I don't do a ton of editing really. Most of the time it'll get rid of like ums or like stuff like that. But outside of that, I publish what's there. Like you need to see the interview. You need to see what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the way that you use that is kind of sort of the same my definition of good art, really. Like when I think about what makes good art, whether I'm doing music or painting or writing, what you're always trying to do is take something new and take something familiar and put them together in a way that's appealing for people, you know? And so that's essentially what you're doing with the description of the YouTube video is you're going, okay, well, I've made something new here, and this is the way that I describe it. And then what it's giving you is, well, here's what people like and expect. And then you're sort of merging the two to create something that is both familiar and easy for people to digest, but also novel and
And
something that
true to
people want
me.
to engage with. Yeah,
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 yeah.
exactly.
Because the description will be what it's about, but the video is truly about who I am, and that's what I deliver. I try to deliver everything to be as smooth as I can, per se, or like just hey, this is what it is. And I feel like sometimes I feel like this is the hypocrisy in this item is, and not even like the hypocrisy in a negative way, but just like where I'm like going with a certain like realm of the subject, like something I had did a, not per se making a plug, but like I was, critical of the bombing of Iran by us, that little, I was like, oh, it's a terrible idea. It's not our place. And I generally don't get very like, hey, this is how I feel about it. But I did. I was like, this is where I'm truly coming from with that. And I kind of put, my reasoning out there, right? I think it's also, if you do have I'm really passionate about this, put it out there. But you can still be balanced and do that, because there's certain things that are going to strike your core. And that's just being authentic to yourself, but also being open to different ideas. When I had done the one interview I told you before earlier with the CIA guy, he was like, well, he was like, there's a lot more to Iran than we all know, and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, I know. I was like, but my gut just tells me it's not our business. We need to mind our own. And that's just an isolationist part of me where I'm like, that's an ocean away type of thing. And and so it's just you hear those different perspectives being, but I still held true to my conviction. But now I understand a little bit more about a little bit more of the complications behind it. But still, in my gut, I'm like, hey, if I was the person that made the call, I wouldn't have done. But I can respect the reason why we did.
Yeah, and I mean, this comes back to what I was saying about, being a dedicated independent, right? Is being able to look at the issue as it is, not saying, oh, well, I'm a Republican, so I'm in support of it, or I'm a Democrat, so I am not in support of it. But being able to look at it and make your own decision, regardless of what your politics are on other issues, and yeah, to dig into it and to find out, okay, well, what is the history of Iran? We go back and forth about we fought them in the past, we've supplied them weapons in the past, we've done all these. It's been back and forth so much over the past 50 years. And so, given all of that, what's my take on this particular action? Being well informed, and then sort of separating yourself from those partisan politics. I think you can make a better decision.
Yeah, and it's I always find it odd that if it's a Republican or Democrat, if one of their own goes across the aisle to get something done, they get ostracized and threatened to get prime. And it's like, whoa, man, like, the country is founded on the art of compromise. Like, it wasn't founded on the art of we're all in here, we get to do what we want. It was the back and forth, finding that middle area. And now you just see like, our current president, I'm not one way or the other, but he's upset with Tom Massey. I believe he's from Kentucky or Tennessee. He's just like terrible. He's a Republican, both Republicans, but Tom Massey's a really true fiscal conservative. Like, he's the type of guy that would like probably walk around shutting the lights off all the time, one of those guys. And so they are like at odds on everything. And so Trump's out there, well, pretty much you're not towing the line. So we're going to primary. There's got to be somebody out there that can run against you. And it's like, really? Like, we really like, this is how to me, it's just such a backwards approach. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that there's always, we should always be cautious about people who attempt to censor other opinions,
Oh, yeah.
because the only reason you need to censor an opinion is if you don't believe that your own position is strong enough to withhold criticism.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
basically it.
Yeah.
And so if you're shutting other people up, it just means that you're afraid of that what they have to say is going to be more influential than what you have to say. So
Well, the irony is I definitely lean center right, probably more towards the right than the center, somewhere in between there. But I found that liberals and Democrats love coming on my show. And I'm like, I would have never thought that in a million years. And ironically, a lot of conservatives, I'm sitting there, I'm kind of like, well, yeah, and they're like, oh, nope, boom. And I'm not knocking conservatives, but, a lot of the Democrats that come to my show tend to be the people that are a little bit more open minded, right? I know there's a lot out there that are not, but I was very surprised that people of that liberal mindset were like, yeah, I'll come on and talk to you. And I'm like, okay.
yeah, and I mean, you can sort of see it in the etymology of the terms, right? Conservative, by definition, means you want things to stay a certain way. Whereas, liberal, the Enlightenment, which was a huge time for philosophy, right? They called it was liberal humanism, is what they called it,
Yes.
right? Which is basically, people starting to think for themselves, right? Not having their view of reality dictated by the church or dictated by certain governments, those sorts of things. So these terms, liberal and conservative, we have them very tied up in politics nowadays. But even if you separate them from politics and just look at what the words themselves mean, then you go, yeah, somebody who is conservative, there's a good chance they already have their mind made up. Whereas somebody who's liberal, they might, but usually they tend to be a little bit more willing and flexible to embrace some different viewpoints, which is, for better or worse, what some of the Democratic Party is based on today.
Yeah. And I'll say, to throw it out there is that I know a lot of younger conservatives are definitely a lot more open minded. I think maybe, I don't know if that's just because as you get older, you get stuck in your ways type of thing. But I know a lot of younger conservatives, and I know a lot of younger conservatives that are pro life, which is like taboo, in that circle, right? So I'm like, okay, no, I will tell you, they won't say it publicly. They will not say it publicly, but they're like, well, yeah, and I'm like, okay, it makes sense. So it's just like, and I'm finding that the liberal voices in the younger generation are out there and they're loud, but the ones that aren't loud of this younger generation coming up that are voting age and in their 20s, a lot more of them are a lot more conservative than people think. And that was proven in the last election. A lot more of them are like, yeah, I like the way it was 15 years ago. I'm not liking this new trend here. Like it's way out of anybody's comfort zone. And I think I didn't see that coming. I figured, hey, it's just the way our country's going. People are left leaning now, and I just assumed, right? I'm just like, okay, it just seems to be the trend, not bad or good in any opinion. And then I start like, I seen the election thing, and then I'm starting to see what like younger people are saying online. And even some of the ones that call themselves liberal or Democrats, I'm like, a lot of your positions are technically called conservative. Not saying that anybody needs to switch, but when you look at some of those things, they're like, yeah, they want universal health care, but I also don't want to pay a bunch of taxes out of their check. And I'm like, those two things don't go together. But I get,
Right.
that like it just doesn't work financially. But it's in coming up in the industry that I did, we somehow I always tend to get a lot of liberal young people, and people that just work for us tend to be a little bit more liberal. So I really learned how to, I want to say like connect necessarily with liberals, but like maybe I just don't see them as demonizing as a lot of people do. One of my best friends in my life, like he's liberal. I mean, he's hardcore Democrat. His printing business prints all the Democratic materials for the whole county, and a lot of it statewide too. People are like, "Oh, I'm like, man, let me tell you, he is hardcore, toes that party line, no matter what, blue good, red bad." But he's also one of those guys that lives those values. He's a guy that will get up in the middle of the night to help someone he barely knows that only met earlier in the week. If they got into an accident, and nobody, they can get out. Okay, boom, out my way. He's on the board of mental health facilities for homeless people, mentally handicapped people. He lives that, what it means to be liberal. And it's just very few people in general live what it means to be what they think, their views are. And because it's difficult to, not all of us have that luxury of being able to, just kind of do that. I think it's important, right? Because whether you're a Republican next door, Democrat next door, Libertarian, ironically, I grew up and became a Libertarian when I was 13. It's really weird. Like that's where my philosophy started. Like my philosophy path has been completely backwards than most people. And I read a book in school called I think it was just called Economics was the name of it, or Basic Economics. It was from Thomas Sowell, and that just kind of like started my whole path down my way of thinking. And then obviously I went way more towards the center. Libertarianism does not work on a national level. You cannot trust everybody to do the right thing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and the interesting thing about libertarianism is that it could be an aspect of the left or the right, really,
Yes.
depending on, what the beliefs are. But yeah, I mean, um, and another important thing to put in there is that, not everybody can live their beliefs all the time. We're all humans, right? And so not only do I make mistakes or slip up once in a while, but I'm also not informed about every single issue, and I think that one of the things that people are the most scared about nowadays is just saying that I don't know. But sometimes you just have to say that. I don't know. I need to look into it rather than coming up with some answer that, you're faking or making up or adopting somebody else's view. Sometimes you just need to say, you know what, I need to look into it more before I make a decision.
Yeah, and the principles of libertarianism I think are great. I think the principles behind it are great. It's just to me, in terms of like when you compare that to like you can put it like right next to communism. The idea is like if you just read it at face value, you're like, man, that yeah, that should work. But then it just completely takes out the human factor.
Hmm.
If it was a robot, that would be great. If we were all robots and we could just be programmed to automatically be good people no matter what, those things would, be great. And to me, libertarianism is essentially capitalism, like in so many ways. Capitalism, same way, but you can't just have unfettered capitalism with nobody kind of going, hey, let's make sure nobody's killing everybody with a donut to save a couple bucks. Put poison in there instead of sugar because, you're not going to notice it for a year, but it'll kill you. But I made $5 billion. And well, I don't think that would happen, right? You've got a lot of people out there who may do something like that to make a couple dollars.
Yeah, I mean, here's something only an independent is going to say, right? But yeah, communism doesn't work, right? Because for the reasons you mentioned, like people aren't all good. And so if there's a certain subset of people that if they know they don't have to do anything and they'll get the same thing as everybody else, they're going to do that. But also, unfettered capitalism doesn't work, and, that a lot of people aren't aware of this, but like the United States is already operating under a socialist, auspices in many,
Yeah,
many ways,
it's
right?
very blended.
Because the alternative, right, with unfettered capitalism is you'd have to be willing to let old people and disabled people die in the streets.
Yeah.
Who's willing to accept that?
And that's
Nobody
just
is.
not
So we
human nature.
create these social support programs, and
Yes.
nobody thinks that there's anything wrong with them, right? All of the Republicans are going to turn 65 and they're going to claim Social Security, and nobody's going to complain about that.
Oh yeah.
But we turn socialism into this huge issue on the one side, and communism and libertarianism, anything can be demonized if you're only going to look at certain aspects of the argument. So, yeah, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding or a willingness to avoid certain aspects of any given argument.
I mean, you could eliminate the federal debt in probably 10 years, just put libertarians in the budget committee for the Senate and the House. And yeah, there'd be no money spent.
Yeah.
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 I think that
You know,
I think that that would actually be a great place for them to be on. Maybe not control the whole thing, but I think libertarians do have a place in the government. I think there's, like if we did have a national healthcare thing, right? Like I feel like libertarians could have a spot in making sure the costs are under control. Things like that, right? I think that their principles apply, but just like Democrats and Republicans, and they like to go, oh, we're not them. A lot of them are pretty hardcore to their principles and they will not stray from it. Like any kind of government, bad, automatically bad, bad, bad. And it's like, man, your party is supposed to be so open minded, but it's so closed minded, and
yeah.
that's what kind of really, and then what really drove me away completely from the party is how they treated Gary Johnson after he ran, they ostracized him because he was not popular among libertarians. He was, but he wasn't, right? Because some gun control things he was in favor of, just different things, right? He favored some government for this. And man, I just remember the controversy. And I'm like, but yeah, he got like what, 3 or 5% of the vote? I'm like, this guy was actually relevant to the public. Finally, was able to look at your party and go, maybe some of those principles do make sense. Instead of just going, well, this is some guy that says everybody just do as they want and hope it all works out. Where a lot of them, that's kind of the approach they put out on their TV ads when they do have them. But Gary Johnson, I felt, was like that Republican who was disillusioned that came to the party and was like, hey, I can represent your principles, even though I may not always agree. And I really didn't like how they treated him afterwards. He was a great guy. Granted, did really not have much of a clue about international politics. Um, you know, I don't know if you remember the Aleppo incident, where they asked him, do you know where Aleppo is? And he was like, what's that? And I was like, oh, you're running for president and you don't know what that is? Like, that's a bad look, buddy.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
uh, but I really liked to me, I felt like he was very middle of the road. He wanted to build new schools and new roads, but he also didn't want to put us further in debt. He also wanted to
Hmm.
make sure Social Security was going to be there, but he wanted to make sure it worked. And I'm like, common sense, right? Like if you sit down with somebody at their dinner table, they're going to want the same thing, really. Even a hardcore liberal is going to be like, yeah, I want this stuff fixed, and I would really like not to pay a lot more money for it. At least an
All right.
American liberal. European liberal would be like, well, we need it regardless. I've got friends who live overseas, and I'm like, they're like, yeah, your version of liberal is what we call conservative here.
Yeah. I remember visiting France and I think the unemployment rate was like 25% or something. And like yeah, everybody was just kind of living off government money to some extent.
Yeah, unemployment was twenty
Oh,
five
I don't know how
percent.
that's sustainable.
Right. If unemployment was 25% here, you'd have riots. You know what
Oh
I mean?
yeah.
Like it would not be a peaceful time. Like people would not put up with it. But I will say Europeans are definitely a little bit more willing if they're mad about something. They're definitely a little more willing to throw fire bombs at government buildings than we are here. When they get upset about something, man, they will burn that government building to the ground and not think twice about it. We're here. It's like, whoa. I've
Yeah.
just noticed like it's like vastly different. They're very liberal, but if something's not going right, well, yeah, man, they don't just sit there on their couch, man. No, they march down there and do something about it.
Yeah.
They will. Like I remember seeing, I think Germany raised the tax, or the EU is going to raise the tax on diesel. So all these farmers, and I know Germany in particular, I think some other countries, they started like taking their farm equipment, blocking all the government stuff, dumping dirt on the government steps, taking poop bags, lighting off fire, throwing against the government buildings, and all that because they wanted to raise the tax on the diesel fuel. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, if Americans had that kind of passion about their everyday life, things would be so much different. And I think that's why the Europeans have some things that Americans want that we don't have, because they're just, not that they're better than us, but they just, something's not right. They don't lay down, man. They'll destroy their whole country to make it work. They'll burn society down.
Yeah.
And here we're like, you don't do that.
Yeah, and I think some of that comes back to we have this reverence for the founding documents of the country that really doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Like European countries and pretty much any other industrial nation, like they'll write new constitutions every few decades. Like, like they'll
Oh
revise
yeah.
stuff. They'll say, yeah, this, things change over time, so we're going to adjust things a little bit. That would never fly in America. We'd never say, yeah, you know what, we're gonna write a new constitution. And so, I think there's good and bad to that, right? I think that, you know, I think it's good because I think that the founding fathers did set up a very viable form of government. But I think there's also it's bad because it closes you off to any type of change, right? You're saying that, okay, well, in 1776, you know, they had it right then, and we don't need to do anything different, and you go, how could that possibly be?
Right.
How over 250 years could nothing change to the extent that we need to reconsider how we're doing things, So it's a little bit of both, but
Yeah. No, it goes. I think it was in the Federalist Papers or one of the founding fathers. They wanted to have each generation have its own constitutional convention or something of that nature. That's what they were kind of talking about. And I would know one of the founding fathers just, I think, said either every generation or two there should be a revolution.
yeah,
They actually advocated the way the Europeans are doing it.
exactly.
They
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
advocate and that's what a lot of people don't want to admit. But when you look at what the founding fathers said, that's what the Europeans are doing.
right.
Like
Yeah,
that, how parliaments work is how the founding, even though the founding fathers didn't want a parliament, their principles were very parliamentary.
yeah,
It's ironic, but oh my God, I could go on about that all day. I'm real big on a 17th Amendment, man. I could probably make an encyclopedia, in my opinion, on that thing. And people are like, I'm like, it's just, it's the representative aspect of it. And there's too much popular vote and not enough state representation. And that's why you have Uncle Sam versus the states.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it's one of the things that has helped us become a great country, right? Is this sort of back and forth. It's a kind of a check and balance of some type, but it's also one of the things that you could argue holds us back from actually making some progress in some areas.
Well,
So
because U.S. senators now, they don't represent the state interest. They say they do. They'll find a couple popcorn headlines that they can slap on their campaigns, but they're beholden to the popular vote and who donates to their campaign. Whereas before 17th Amendment, they were generally appointed by state assemblies. Some states they were popularly elected in the state, but most of them were state assemblies or governors. And where I think that that's a benefit, I get why they got rid of it because of corruption back then, because you couldn't really trace it like you can now. But where the benefit of that is the problem that me and you have in our state is going to be represented by our governor, our state legislator, who appoints that person to the federal government and the Senate, who's going to represent our interests to a degree. And so then you got the House, who's supposed to represent you and I, the common man, right? But we have the same problem that the state government does. Well, we want this healthcare fix, that. Okay, well, that's popular in the House. The House of Reps has tried to address a lot of these things for so long, but the Senate, I don't know if you've ever heard the joke, everything dies in the Senate. Like it just dies there because it's popular. It's all it is. It's what the thing is. But if they had to represent those interests, our interests, we put that. That was the whole point of it, is to give the states representation and the people representation, because our needs are going to be the same needs as the states for the most part. So things would get done and they would progress. But now it's just become this big slug that just doesn't move. And it's all because everybody wants to make sure that they look good in the eyes of their party, not their voter, their party. And that's just where, I mean, like New York's gonna have different problems than Michigan, you know,
right, and they're
but
going to compound. I mean,
right.
they're going to compound because for the reasons that you're mentioning.
Yeah, and that's just, and a lot of people are like, well, and I get it, but I'm like, it just seems to me if our state's interests were represented more, we'd have a lot less problems because states struggle with paying for healthcare just like the federal government does. So the House is trying to address it under Democrats and Republicans because it's more based on, like the Speaker of the House. While he is Speaker of the House, his district's still only a certain size. It's not this massive state. So that's why you see the more popular things you see the populist ideas here in the House, and the Senate is just, well, I listen to the big ideas. I'm the big idea people. They pretty much look down on the House as you are the little people. And it's become this superiority thing to me. Anyways, it's just an opinion, and I just feel like that's where our system is broke because neither house respects neither branch respects the other. The executive branch definitely doesn't respect the legislative.
Yeah, or the judicial, you
Yeah, I
know?
mean, the problem is like a lot of people, the Supreme Court are like, oh, the Supreme Court's overturning all this stuff that matters so much to us. And I'm like, I agree, a lot of it does matter. But if you actually dig into what the majority ruling says, it says this needs to be a congressional action, not a decision by the court. And then Congress get out there and they'll be like, oh, well, the court, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad. And it's like, well, yeah, but you held the House, the Senate, and the presidency. You could have easily fixed this problem at any time. But you did. You wanted the Supreme Court to do it so you could, hey, you could be hands off. And the Supreme Court's now kicking the buck back to Congress going, no, this is your job. It's not ours. Stop making us the bad guys. Like abortion. I mean, no matter anybody's personal feelings on it, it's something that, the Supreme Court said, everybody's like, oh, they overturned Roe v. Wade, da, 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 they're making abortion legal. Depending on your state, that may be the case. But what they said in that, majority opinion is it should be something that's done by Congress. And I'm like, that makes sense. It's the will of the people, not the will of 9 people on a bench that none of us have ever had any impact on electing them or appointing them. Like we had no factor in it whatsoever, you know, no representation. So a lot of our laws right now are decided by people we've had no representation.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. The three branches exist to counterbalance each other. And really, you and me, the only way we can express our opinions is through the legislative branch to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Through our representatives. Anything else is outside of our hands. And like, how does that make you feel living in a representative republic that decisions can be made without any input at all from your side?
Yeah, I think even though I'm not a diehard fan, Elon Musk, I think he said like 70% or 60 regulations are all made by people that are not even. He goes, a lot of the rules in our country are made by people that have never been elected. The public doesn't even know who they are. They've never seen them. Yet they're running your life. And I was like, that's what kind of, he said that recently, but he's also said that ages ago too. And when I first heard that, I was like, okay, I started looking at him like, man, this guy's right. I'm like, I mean, I knew it, but I guess I didn't really like know it. And then the more I just started digging into it and the more I'm like, man, really? I mean, like a lot of our elected leaders are just talking heads and the work is done by the people that they hire. And, I forget what was it during Obama's term or whatever, the House of Representatives were, they were trying to pass a bill. I think they passed it, but they were like, we'll read what's in it. No, it might have been during, we'll read what's in it after we pass it.
Yeah, and that's the problem with a lot of modern bills is, a lot of these things come in at 900 pages or whatever,
Like, who's got
and
time to read
then
that?
they're rushed to vote for them at 1 in the morning, and you go, what about any of this seems legitimate to you?
Right.
That we can put 900 pages of whatever it is into something and then have a vote on it in the middle of the night?
Yeah, it's man, we could go on all day about it, man. Like
Yeah.
we're gonna have to definitely do another episode on this, like just in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to
Philosophy.
come back on sometime,
Yeah,
but yeah.
philosophy is just like, man, I could write a whole book. My philosophy is probably one of the more unique ones out there in general, and it seems to be gaining traction on, the podcast world, which is nice. I never thought that it would be, never thought I would get an email saying I ranked 36th. But that was, I mean, I went to them, I'm like, holy I was like, I never knew that. I'm like, when I'm looking at my numbers, I'm sitting there going, man, I wish these were higher. I'm like, not that I'm like, I was like, I was really hoping that it would be higher. But then coming to find out, I'm like, well, they are better than I thought. So that's just, it was kind of cool to see, it was neat to see. I mean, I don't sit there and like refresh, to see what ranking I am every day. It was a neat email. I made a sweet AI video about it. It's on my YouTube page. I loved it. It was just like, boom, I love making AI videos about stuff like that. It's just fun. But yeah, Joel, you anything you want to plug into people before you go?
No, not really. I'm not a great marketer. I just kind of do my thing, and whoever tunes in, tunes in. But yeah, if you want to listen to my music, you can Google my name. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, that type of thing. If you want to listen to my podcast, it's From Nowhere to Nothing. You can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts, and that's about it.
Well, Joel, I appreciate you being on here, man. And are you a sports fan?
Yeah,
I'm gonna say you're the Bill fan.
yes, we are Bills territory.
Yeah, see, I don't even know where that
We were
city's
rooting
at.
for the Lions last year. We were rooting for the Lions last
Man,
year.
let me tell
We wanted
you,
to see a Lions Bills Super Bowl, but
the Lions were so dominant all year, and I was at that playoff game for the Lions, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, I could have sold the because I had season tickets up until this year, and I'm like, man, I could have really sold this and made 3 4 grand, but yet
yeah,
I'm here and you lost. You lost. Like I'm like, I gave up this much money to watch you lose, and then I get a bill in the mail, and they doubled my tickets.
jeez.
I was like, you know what? Bleep you, man. I'm like, their average ticket price now is more expensive than the Eagles. I'm like, you guys haven't even been to the Super Bowl. How are you more expensive than the Eagles?
Yeah,
They've at least got credibility to charge that much.
right. I think the same thing's going to happen here. I mean, after reliably losing to the Chiefs in the AFC playoff game every year, now we're building a new stadium, and I'm pretty sure our ticket prices are going through the roof. So
Yeah, at least you guys got Josh Allen. I love Jared Goff.
yeah, he's entertaining. Yeah, yeah,
But Jared Goff, he was sent to Detroit to die and somehow turned it up where Matt Stafford went to LA and won a Super Bowl. But here in Detroit, he could just coaching staff couldn't get things. It just nothing ever worked out for him. I mean, if Stafford was on the Lions team we had now, and no shade towards Jared Goff at all, I think the Lions would have won a Super Bowl in the last 2 years, just because Stafford's that much
probably.
better. Not like in
Yeah.
terms of just a pure passer.
Yep.
Stafford never had a running game like the Lions have, ever
Yeah.
in his life when he was here. I mean, I think he had a 1,000 yard running back once or twice in 10, 12 years here.
Right.
You're never going to win football games not running the ball.
No, that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback and the defense in that case.
But at least we can both universally dislike Chiefs and Patrick
That's right.
Mahomes.
We can. Yes.
And let me tell you, when the Lions beat Chiefs in that season opener, man, I was actually they did a viewing party down at Ford Field with season ticket holders that year. So you got to sit there with a bunch of season ticket holders and watch the Lions like upset the whole NFL world, and I think that game right there is what really put them back on the map because there wasn't other games going on. No, this was the game. Whole world got to see it, and that made the Lions relevant because
Yeah.
they've been a laughing stock my whole life. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
still faithfully went to the games, and back then it was $20 to park, and now it's 100. And it's like, man, like I want you guys to win a Super Bowl because you just maybe go back to being mediocre, so it's like palatable to spend that much money. Like I'll take a little bit of mediocrity to make it a little more affordable. Like just win one Super Bowl, then you can go 10 years being average.
Right.
Like
Yep.
just but it's my gosh, I did actually an episode if you want to catch some stuff a little bit about sports contracts with Dr. Glenn Toby.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
have to check that one out.
yeah, he did stuff like Run DMC, like 50 Cent, Michael Bloomberg, but he also represented a lot. You remember Asante Samuel?
Yeah.
He was actually his agent.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's doing stuff with a lot of the college kids with the NIL, getting money off their likeness now and stuff like. Man, real like, and he was actually a homeless kid on the streets of in your state, but in Brooklyn. And
Gotcha.
he went from being a homeless kid to where he's at now. He does TEDx talk, speaking events, and all that stuff too. It was really an engaging episode. I mean, this is probably one of my most engaging episodes in terms of just a philosophical conversation. But that was just like I was like, man, I'm like, I never knew anybody who had like I won't say like the inside scoop, right? But like the can give me those little tidbits that I always wondered why did 2 + 2 = 4 in this, And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't even know that athlete, representatives also did musicians and that such type of stuff. I kind of thought that was just a different.
I think he's kind of maybe like an anomaly, but he is, but in his office, he's got like all that stuff out there. I mean, he's just got tons of it. I mean, he's like he's got little figurines that he's made for his books. He's made children's books, venture capitalism. Capitalist, I should say. He does. I think it's a book bank foundation to help kids read, and that's his real big passion. It's like actually more than anything else he does. Like that is his true love and soul of that, and it comes from him being homeless when he was young. And it was just great. And I'm actually going to be having. I got to figure out the exact date, but another TEDx speaker on. His name's, I think you say Amit, and he's ran. I watched a couple of his stuff. If you ever get a chance, check them guys out in TEDx talks. Great stuff too. I mean, great people on that platform of speakers, whatever you want to call it, that scene. And that's kind of like what I've done with the podcast. I just start going after people that I would normally like probably not have a conversation with normally, and I'm just learning new things.
Yeah. Yeah. That I do the same thing. Yeah, just pick out people and shoot your shot.
Yeah,
See if you can get them.
I'm gonna
And
start
more than
tuning.
often you can.
Yeah, I'm gonna start tuning into your podcast more. I mean, because it's just the thought process is there. So not many people have an analytical thought process like you do. And that is so rare. When I was in a class of like 30 people, they did like 4 quadrants, and I was the only person in that room that found analytical. I was by myself, alone on an island. Everyone was a creative or whatever else. I was like, yeah, I really felt alone in a room full of 30 people.
Man. Jeez.
So, but yeah, Joel, I appreciate you coming on. Give me like, several days whenever. And what I do is I'll send you over I send out the Buzzsprout links, and I'll put are you okay with it going on YouTube as well?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
I just asked to be safe, and I'll send you all the YouTube links. I usually do like 1 or 2 shorts out of that, and I put it on the short thing, and I'll put like a couple days before the episode publishes to try to get that name out there and all that. And then when that name drops, the episode drops, it starts getting some more traction pretty quick. I found that the shorts get epically a phenomenal more amount of views than any full episode. Full episodes get way more traction on like regular podcast. Short videos and things like that get way more traction on YouTube.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. I mean, I knew it would kind of be like that, but I guess I just didn't think it would be like that. Like where there's an episode that I had, I forget the name of it, which one it was, but it has like 600 downloads, I think, right now. But on YouTube, it has like the full video version on YouTube has like 5 views.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. I have the same thing. Most at this point, most of my episodes are up over 1,000 views, but the few that are on my YouTube channel, well, I don't know. I guess I couldn't even answer that anymore because somewhere along the line, Podbean started posting YouTube videos for me, and I've never checked into them. I,
Yeah,
I have no idea if anybody's watching them
I'm
or
gonna have to
not,
look
but
up Podbean because right now, what I do when I do everything, I have to like when I do an episode, I got to go to YouTube separately, go to Buzzsprout separately, go to this separately, and I'm like, man, I wish I could just like just one button to everything. Like now, Riverside
yeah.
does offer that feature to a point, but it's more just like kind of like an automated posting almost. And I'm like, yeah, I want it to be specific, and I don't know if that's just me being neurotic or not, but
Right.
but all right, Joel. Well, I'll let you get to it. I'm gonna go and eat some dinner myself. All right,
Yeah,
thanks,
thanks for
man.
having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun. Like I said, give me a couple days and I'll shoot everything over to you.
Sounds good.
All right, have a good one.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Bye bye.